So many of you must have seen what has been happening in our society concerning our children in the last few weeks. And so these are my 2 cents. Welcome to Sipping Some Legal Tea. So today, what is our topic? So as you have seen over the last few weeks, we have had quite a number of challenges or, issues, topics that concern our children. And as a child advocate myself, it is very devastating, very concerning. And you would probably have seen some articles from me or hear the children's cry. We have made also some comments. And trust me, my heart bleeds for our children of this society. I know many of us have been arguing that, listen, both the 11-year-old and the child at 6 ought to be deemed as victims, while we have some articulating that no, the child must be punished, the 11-year-old must be punished severely, etc., etc. No, I'm here to set the record straight. And as we have heard several times before, that the age of criminal responsibility is 12 years and above. So anyone below the age of 12 years, we call it Dole Incapax, they are not criminally liable. And unfortunately for those who are victims of such incidents of crime, then we have to look at other measures in order to hold that individual accountable. So that 11-year-old child, for sure, we can't put him behind bars, and I would not recommend it in any event. The truth is, we must look at social intervention strategies. Counseling, for certain, is one area that which we must explore for him. I am a firm believer that he is also a victim in some way, shape and form, because the society has failed him. Our country, our nation has become so overly over-sexualized that pornography is at our fingertips, at our pretty much beck and call for even our children. Our music, they are laced with sexual content, sexual images. And how can you blame someone like him if that is what he has grown to become accustomed to, that which he is aware of? At 11 years old, ideally, our children should be so innocent. Their innocence should be so preserved that they are not familiar or aware of what to do with these body parts that they are becoming familiar with. Not in that regard, So it must be that my opinion is that he may be a victim of sexual assault himself or some form of sexual offense. But also, he could very much be someone who would have been exposed to pornographic or some form of content sexually. I personally believe that counseling is important, should be mandated for him. I also believe that he should be held accountable, and so they should investigate properly and intensely as to what could have driven him to make that decision in luring this 6-year-old little girl and, exposing her in that fashion. I believe also that we may need to look into whether it is a first-time offense. And if it is not a first-time offense, then we may need to take stricter measures and take a different approach, not just in counseling, but definitely possibly punishment at his school, give him some form of expulsion, or maybe expel him or relocate him to a different institution. Maybe suspension might be one such. And of course, get him to do something with his time and his mind that will elevate and educate him of this gruesome act which he has committed. I am deeply saddened by what has transpired, and I sincerely feel it for the parent of the 6-year-old. However, I'm also I'm concerned with the parent of the 11-year-old. I've not heard anything from them. What is their view? What have they contributed in any fashion, form, or way to eliminate the impact that this has had on the family of the 6-year-old little girl? We don't know. And so I also wonder if they too need counseling. Both parties may need counseling for sure and must be spoken to. So that's it for legal tea concerning that matter. But we must remember the Child Care and Protection Act speaks to protecting our children in every way. Remember, we are looking at the rights of our children, and neglect also has been another issue that has been in the media for quite some time this week. And it could also be another means of neglect. Maybe the parent of the 11-year-old has been neglecting their child. And so, as the word of God says, we often even quote it, the devil find work for idle hands. And so the fact is, maybe that child has been neglected. And neglect is defined as where someone who is a caregiver essentially fails to provide one's basic needs, food, shelter, clothing. But I would also extend it even more to love and affection, where we have neglected, we have failed as a caregiver or parent, or even the church, the society, our teachers, our guidance counselors from time to time. We have failed to provide the basic needs, amenity, proper education or education at all. Love, a community for trust and confidence, for our children to feel safe, where our children no longer have that village. They no longer feel encouraged. You know, we often expose our children to social media, TikTok, Instagram, the various social media platforms. We have left our children for them to educate themselves. And so we don't always monitor them and scrutinize what it is that they are watching or feeding themselves. So we must remember our responsibility as a friend, as a mother, as an aunt, as a grandparent, as a teacher, as a pastor, that our children's well-being is always paramount and that we cannot afford to neglect them. I share this with you, and this pains my heart. Last week, as an attorney, I've had this client where I have been going back and forth to court with her, representing her so that she can have joint custody, care and control of her two-year-old son. And it so happened that the child has been sick over the last few months, and she has been really hot and bothered about it because the child has been with the father for quite some time, primarily because she gave up the child at around 7 months when she was highly frustrated. He was not giving her the support. He was not adequately showing any involvement in the child's life. And of course, I also believe she was probably suffering from post-traumatic distress, postpartum depression. So she gave up the child to the father, who she believed would have taken good enough care of him. Unfortunately, the father decided that he was not going to give her back the child. When she kind of put herself in a better position, she's now able to take care of the child. She was not working at the time when she gave up the child to the father. So she eventually asked him. He refused. Fine. We went to court on several occasions, and he indicated to the court that she's not a fit and proper parent, and notwithstanding, by the way, that when she first got pregnant, he encouraged her to do an abortion, and she did not, because he did not provide the funding at the time, but he was the one who introduced it to her. It so happened that at this point in time, he had the child, and he basically left the child based on his job. He left the child with his ex-girlfriend, whom he eventually told the court that they were a family unit. Now the child developed respiratory issues, and now my client had to be going back and forth to the hospital. The father is nowhere to be found, because each time, first of all, he did not even put his name on the birth certificate. And eventually, the lady whom the child was being taken care with, whom the child was staying with, she kept calling my client every time about his respiratory issues. My client eventually got a diagnosis that he had a severe adenoids, and it was causing severe compression on his lungs area, etc. And so he had to be nebulized several times. Now, finally getting this report, my client showed it to the father. And the last time we went to court, when we also been going back and forth, we were all back and forth about this matter. The court, he said, without any opposition this time, really, he said, listen, give her full custody. And we said, but we did not ask for full custody. We have no issues. We advocate for fathers to be present in the life of their children, especially this little boy's life. And he said, no. The judge asked him, do you know what full custody means? He said, yes, he's very much aware. He does not want to have anything to do with this child. His job is not allowing him he cannot adequately care for the child and all of that. And that pains my heart to know that having gone through this back and forth to court for such a long time, we could have avoided that. My client could have avoided incurring all of these legal fees. But even more so, the fact that you just give up your responsibility. And I look at it and say to myself, you know what happened? Now that the child has been diagnosed with a situation that probably is a burden to him, he doesn't want to have anything to do with that responsibility. And another cycle of neglect, another child that may grow up without a present and an active father. Now, I've also encouraged my client to, notwithstanding what he has said in court and notwithstanding what is on paper, that you have full custody, please try to involve him no matter what. Even if he doesn't want to be present physically, let the child know of him and let him know about the child's well-being. Maybe at some point later on, he might change his mind. And I do hope so. Because we see too many broken children in our society. Hence the reason for our crime rate. Hence the reason we have children having children. Children assaulting children. We have too many brokenness, broken hopes, broken minds, broken emotions that is permeating this society. So, today on Legal Tea, we are talking about our children. We are talking about neglect. We are talking about protecting our children from harm. A few months ago, we saw where children were left at home and were succumbed to fire burn, a burnt house, burnt environment, right? And there are so many things to address with that, because what we need to understand is our society is at fault. So many women having to tend to their children solely, and they have to be juggling. They have to be finding a good job that can take care of them and their children, sometimes not one, but 2 and 3. And so the fathers are absentee fathers. The fathers have given up the responsibility of shared responsibility. And you find that we want to hold the parents accountable, the mother accountable for what has transpired. But it is almost like you are ripping band-aids off these wounds that these mothers are already experiencing, where they are single, where they have no support, where they cannot afford what is the basic amenities for their children. And so we know that poverty is an issue. We know that being uneducated, lack of education, we know that unemployment, underemployment, right, can be a factor. We know that childhood trauma can be a factor as well, where it is a generation curse, a generation to generation issue. The mother abandoned their child, and then the child who now has another child abandons their child, and it goes on and on and on. So, we want to remember our people, we want to remember our children, we want to remember that we need each other and we need to support. We need to look out for our children, the vulnerable groups, the vulnerable members of society. Our children need support. Our children need a community. So if you know of children that are being abused, that are being neglected, we should really take charge of calling the relevant agencies and entities that can provide some support. Sometimes we see and we ignore, and they say we look and we don't judge. Sometimes we need to open our eyes, open our mouths, make a call, and try to assist. So today, those are some of my 2 cents. That is something I wanted to share with you all as a child advocate. We want to look out for each other, share the burden, invite persons that are of certain quality standard, persons who we know are advocates, into our community, into our circle, to advise our parents, advise our children. We need to call for the relevant agencies for intervention. and to continue to protect and provide good advice, counseling for those that are particularly affected by violence, neglect, sexual assault on our children. So we have been talking about abuse of our children, but this time there was an article recently concerning a 14-year-old boy, as you may see, and it was that the mother was living in fear of this 14-year-old. But guess what? What is common in these cases, and I've mentioned before, is the fact of neglect. Our children are being neglected. Now, if you leave your child to migrate, to go overseas, to work, we understand that our economy is not so favorable to you. But the truth is, there are consequences that will flow from this. And so we see where our children are generally impacted in a negative way. When a child at 14 is going to abuse his mother, it goes against the grain of society, against our morals, our values. While we ought to be maintaining our parents in relation pursuant to the Maintenance Act, we have to understand that this is also in breach of the Domestic Violence Act. And so our children must be preserved. But remember, neglect is a live issue. It's a form of abuse. And you will find that our children are being neglected. They are not provided the relevant care, protection. Now, if you migrate and send your child money, food, but you are not physically present, then don't be alarmed that this will have adverse impact on you in the future. We have also seen where beating in schools is banned, and they're contemplating whether or not this is to be recommended in our homes. Now, obviously, corporal punishment has always been a topical issue. Should a child be beaten? Corporal punishment has been a live issue in recent times. Whether our children should be beaten in schools, whether it is banned, but our Child Care Protection Act prohibits violence against our children. And so we must take that into account. So it's not entirely as explicitly, the Education Act does not explicitly speaks about the issue of corporal punishment being totally banned or abolished, but it definitely is a direction in which our society or government is going, which is to use social intervention strategies, which is to encourage counseling, peer mediation, to settle disputes among our children. And in schools particularly, they are even looking at making recommendations for corporal punishment to be eliminated entirely, even in our homes. So it is a live issue to be discussed, and I'm hoping and I'm engaging you. What do you think? Should corporal punishment be banned entirely in even the homes? Is that taking away the legal right of the parent of disciplining their child? Should discipline and abuse should we consider discipline as the same as abuse? Or should we definitely create a particular definition which explicitly draws the line between an abusive situation with mother and child, father and child, or parent and child,